So my assignments are submitted, which is great because 2023 so far has just been me screaming at a computer.
Spaghetti.
Have you ever had a dream that you want him to do you so much you could do anything?
Then I was so tired from the late nights of doing assignment work that I got in a fight with a bread knife. I lost the fight, but now I'm here to talk to you about my favourite books of 2022. 2022 was a bit of an odd reading year. I felt in the moment like I'd read a load of great books that I was just like really loving, but it just felt like I had a lot of things I really liked, but none that I really love. Well, that's a lie, because obviously I've got a list of books I love here for you today. But yeah, it was definitely a year of 4 stars over 5 stars, which is interesting because, as I say, I felt like I had a really good reading year. As always with these sorts of videos, these are all my opinions. I absolutely know that some people hate these books. In fact, the one I'm going to start with, both my sisters DNF. Last year I talked about Convenience Store Woman, which is right here on my bookshelf by Sayaka Murata. This still lives in my favourite shelf. Not that I have a physical favourite shelf. That's going to happen soon though, and we're going to do a little tour of that when it happens. But I love this book. It's a really interesting take on careers and cultural expectations of careers and being neurodivergent coded, I guess. It's not really defined that they are neurodivergent in this book, but these neurodivergent coded characters, I just love that sort of thing. So I'm really happy that at number 8 on this list, yeah, it's the top 8, even though there's 10 books. Number 8 on this list is Earthlings by Sayaka Murata. They also go super nicely together. Earthlings is about another neurodivergent coded woman who believed that they were an alien for a lot of their childhood, and upon experiencing some trauma in life, they kind of revert back to that mentality. And it's a really interesting look at trauma. Completely understand why people would hate it, because it's out there, and 2, it's full of trauma. So I completely get why people don't like it, but I kind of loved it. It also once again deals with the concept of societal expectations in the form of growing up and getting married. Definitely not for the faint of heart. Read the content warnings of this one, but if you're into sort of absurd takes on neurodivergent characters, give this a try. This next book kind of came out of nowhere for me. I ended up seeing it advertised to me on Amazon. I hadn't heard anybody talk about it literally until last week, and I read this in March. But it's again in the same realm of like just absurdness. It's the best way to describe it. You can tell this is a pandemic book because it's just the form of it itself is just madness. And that is Several People Are Typing by Calvin Kasulk. I think that's how you say his last name. It's a story entirely written in the form of Slack messages. So it was a really fast read. It felt really genuine, like having been in group chats, not only for work, but also like personally. It felt really like genuine. It felt like this was a real team. You definitely had a couple of different archetypes of people that you would maybe work with in that sort of a business. But what happens is one of the characters in this story gets sucked into Slack. As I say, it's super absurd, but it was also like a really good bit of fun and just came out of nowhere and surprised me, and it got me out of a reading slump as well, which is great. Like I had a little mini slump in March, and this was what got it out. So good on you. Next up is definitely the biggest book on my favourites list. I tend to be a short book reader, which is kind of mad considering I also love Brandon Sanderson's work. But I'd say about 75% of the time the books I'm reading are under about 250 pages. But this next bad boy is 650 pages long. I read it in its entirety whilst waiting around to do jury service this year, which was super fun. Definitely great for my reading goals. But yeah, and it was once again a Sisters Book Club pick. Wasn't one of mine actually, it was my sister Maisie's, and it is Battle Royale by Koushun Takami. This book was published in Japan in 1999, and it is I don't want to say it's the source material for the Hunger Games because I'm not sure that this is actually the direct influence, but this is the Battle Royale. This established Battle Royale as a genre in terms of gaming, a genre in terms of, like, books. It definitely started this whole kids killing kids thing that became a trope of young adult books in, like, the early 2000s. But yeah, I loved every single minute of it. It was not even hard to get through this book. I don't think I would have struggled to get through this book even without being on jury service. Like, it was that much of a page turner. It was one of those books where you say you're going to finish when the chapter ends, and then you just breeze through the next chapter because you've forgotten that that's what you were going to say. Or maybe that's just a me thing. Everything felt so believable. Like, these kids weren't like master fighters or whatever. One thing I will say with this is that there are multiple translations. I read the new translation by Nathan Collins, but there was one point where I was trying to read an ebook of it and it was a completely different translation. So I would recommend to make sure you stay with the right one. Doesn't matter which one. I think my sister went with a different one and still loved this book, but I would just, yeah, stick with one translation. It's going to make it so much easier. This next book is something you'd probably expect if you saw my top books of last year. I had 2 books by this author in my number 2 spot, so it's kind of a given that this was going to be up there. But it's a little bit lower than I was anticipating, actually. I mean, if we're counting the books that have been grouped together as like the 10, this comes at like 7, which is kind of mad. If you haven't already guessed, this is Before Your Memory Fades by Toshikazu Kawaguchi. And this is the 3rd installment of the Before the Coffee Gets Cold series. This one, however, is set in a different cafe. I believe it is a relative of the owners of Funicular from the first 2 books, that owns Cafe Donna Donna, I believe that's what it's called in this one. Yeah, Cafe Donna Donna. I'm Donna! So this one introduced to us a lot of new recurring characters, like the staff of this cafe, some new relatives of the original family that we knew from the first 2 books. I felt like I didn't latch on to these new characters as much as I did the first ones. Like, for example, there's a character in here that is a budding comedian who is apparently not very funny and wants to pursue this career in comedy. And one of the stories bases around his girlfriend going into the future, I think, and seeing him. And it felt very unbelievable. But that was the only story in here that I didn't really vibe with. The rest of them still had a lot of meaning and were very heartfelt. And I didn't actually cry with this one. But I still feel like putting it in my top books because I feel like as part of the entire collection of these stories, it's still a big part of it, and I just love this series of books so much that I couldn't bear the thought of like leaving this off. Next up, we have a book from a different book club. This is the Pocket Pages book club that is run by Alison Pages. This was not something I was expecting to love. I'm not the biggest like reader of nature-based books, or non-fiction for that matter. I find it kind of difficult to get through non-fiction even if I'm enjoying what I'm reading. Like, for example, essay collections take me forever. And this did take me a good solid, like, 3 or 4 months to solidly read through. But I knew from page 1 that this was going to be a 5-star read. And that is Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimura. Everything that is written in this book feels somewhat lyrical in the way she talks about Indigenous wisdom, or even just a strawberry plant, or the colour of the flowers in her garden. Everything feels intentional. Every single word feels like it has a place in this book. And it's making me so excited to read Gathering Moss in February for Pocket Pages Book Club again. If you like literary fiction in any capacity, I would highly recommend this book as a gateway into non-fiction that means something to you. I absolutely look at strawberries and maple syrup so differently now than I did before reading this, and I feel like it's made me a little bit more aware of my existence. And that's worth something, right? Next up on the list is actually 2 comic book collections. I stumbled into the first one of these books in my cat's birthday vlog which you can totally see. I will put a little card for it up in the corner. I then found the comic on Instagram, and then a second collection came out in September. So I bought them both physically, and now I've got them both. I read the first one twice this year, and that is Cat's Cafe and Cat's Cafe One Cup at a Time. This is a set of comics based around a cafe, and it delves into mental health, and each little character has got its own unique quirks. Like Penguin is caffeine obsessed. The rabbit has really bad self-esteem issues. Like you get to see them all learn and grow. It's really wholesome. It's just honestly such a good vibe, and like every time I'm in a bad mood I want to read this. I think this is especially poignant simply because this year has kind of kick-started my mental health and my neurodivergent discovery journey. So these have been like a big part of just accepting what's going on. Every single character in this book is loved and acknowledged and taken as they are, and it's just good vibes. Yeah, I have nothing more to say. I love these comics. And they are on Instagram as well. If you search up Cat's Cafe, I can't remember the handle, but I will put it in the screen right now. Right, top two. It's 3 books, but it's a top 2. Also just noticed I spilled some drink on my boob. That's handy. Go Meg, great job.
Kim, you're doing amazing, sweetie.
The next book I bought for Name alone. In fact, my partner bought it from me. He picked it out because it had a weeb name, is what he said to me. Little did I know it was a graphic horror, and little did I know that I'd actually really enjoy it. And that is In the Miso Soup by Ryu Murakami. Not Haruki Murakami. Just gonna set that up for you. They are 2 different authors. I think Ali Smith, Sadie Smith. This book is about the sex industry in Japan and an American psycho that comes and murders a bunch of people. And yes, I said American Psycho because it gives American Psycho vibes. Our protagonist in this book is Kenji. He is a tour guide in the Tokyo sex district. And an American tourist named Frank has paid a hell of a lot of money to receive a couple day long tour of the sex district just before New Year's. And that's how it begins. And then it devolves into this terrorizing thing, and you don't know whether the protagonist is going to make it out alive. He's got a girlfriend at home, and Kenji begins to worry for her safety. It's amazing. Even on the front it says American Psycho. Reads like the script notes for American Psycho: The Holiday Abroad. I think that nails it on the head. It's funny though, because after reading this I wanted to read more Ryu Murakami. The one I picked as a 1-star is my only 1-star of the year, which was Coin Locker Babies. It was also like 500 pages long, whereas this is 180. So I'm hoping his short form horror is a lot better than his long form horror. Before we get to the number 1 spot, I do have a couple of honourable mentions that I'd like to bring up. These are books that I love and I will be remembering for many, many years to come. I will probably read many, many times. They just didn't quite fit the favourites book grouping. Lonely Castle in the Mirror by Mizuki Sugimura. I was gonna like that one. I mean, those of you that have read this probably know that this is right up my alley. It's kind of fantastical. It's interesting. The characters are really developed and I love the story. Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldree. Yes, everyone loves this book. I would agree. It's a warm cup of coffee in a book. Miss I Sandwich by Miku Karakami, another neurodivergent code character in a very short form book. I just love neurodivergent. The 5 Runes by Kirsten Valdez Quaid. This is a beautiful story about women overcoming the social standings that the men in their lives have put them in, and grief and otherness. It's all there. Fantastic book. The Housekeeper and the Professor by Yoko Ogawa, a heart-wrenching tale about memory loss and the connections you make. But at number 1, I think given the fact that my favourite book in the Mid-Year Freakout tag hasn't been on here yet, you might know what one of these 2 books is. And of course it is The Monk and Robot Duology by Becky Chambers. I've already got the 1. I've already got the 2nd one actually, A Prayer for the Crown Shy. I read the first one as an ebook, 2nd one came out a couple months after, but I managed to get my hands on a signed copy from Becky Chambers herself. This duology is short and sweet, about a monk in a fantastical world who serves tea and listens to people's problems and is struggling to find the meaning in their own life. They travel out to the wilderness in order to find themselves and stumble upon a robot named Mosscap who, after his kind has been banished from interaction with the human-like civilization in this world, is checking in with the humans just to see how their lives have changed and wants to know all about the way humans live. These two are definitely going to be reread next year, possibly like next month, I swear. I'm very much ready to reread them again, and I'd love to read them back to back this time. There was a couple of months in between the two, and so I feel like I have more love for the first one, but I don't know if that would be the case in a reread. I have no idea, but I love these stories so much. They are just... A lot of my favourite books this year have been about acceptance and mental struggles and neurodiversity. And here we are, in the world, accepting myself as I stand with mental health issues and possible neurodivergence. So I guess that's the running theme in this one. I'd love to see how much of this list holds up in a couple years' time. I don't know if it's just a product of the time that I'm living in as a person. I guess we'll see what time tells us. But that is my list. I'm so excited for the next reading year. I've got so many big plans in terms of books. I'm literally going to stay at my mum's house for like a couple days to cat sit, and I'm taking a massive stack of books with me. And you'll be coming along for the ride as well. I've got a vlog coming up that I'm going to do while I'm there. And I definitely think it's time to start rereading some favourites. Now I've got a solid selection of them under my belt, having rediscovered reading in 2020. But with that, I am going to leave it here for today. So thank you all ever so much for discovering my favourite books of this year with me. I'd love to know what yours are in the comments below, and I look forward to seeing you soon.